Hello, my name is Nathan Fiala. I'm an associate professor at the University of Connecticut. I'm here today to present some work I'm doing with my colleagues in the city of Hyderabad with the police. We are helping the police to learn about how to reduce street level harassment of women. And it's going to be a novel data collection. I'll also spend a little bit of time talking about how we're doing the actual assessment and what's kind of interesting about the data collection that we're doing. So those of you that are familiar with the news in India know that there is a big problem with street level harassment for women. Some of this harassment can become quite violent. And so many towns, many cities in the country are trying to find ways to more actively police this problem. However, there's really no evidence on the effect of police patrolling on street harassment, in part because it's a crime that's very frequent. It's actually very highly tolerated by many people. It's very hard to detect, and there's very large variation in types of crime. So, anything from staring all the way up to assaults. The research question that we have is, what's the effect of street patrolling that targets harassment on the types and frequency of incidents of harassment? And what drives these changes? Visibility, quantity of focused police, and a few other things that we'll be exploring. But what I really want to spend a little bit of time on today talking about is what's the best way to measure these changes in incidents. So we could first ask women. This is a very common approach. We simply could run an enumerated survey where we ask women about their perceptions of safety in an area. However, perceptions of safety are not the same as actual changes in safety. So we wanted to complement that approach with something that could be a little bit more objective of an indicator of whether harassment is happening. And so we want to try and find a high-powered objective measure that we can use to measure that. Before I talk about how we're going to do that, though, let me tell you about the program. It's called the Safety, Health, and Environment Program, SHE Teams. It's a policing program. Teams of 4 officers patrol a hotspot, and the team has at least 1 female officer. They spend 15 to 20 minutes at a hotspot between about the hours of 2 to 7 p.m. And they have 2 types of teams, a uniformed officer and an undercover officer. Now, hotspots are areas where the police know that women are likely to face harassment, and they actually used a predictive algorithm to try and figure out where the best places to define are. These are mostly bus stops, railway stations, and busy markets, places where there's a lot of women, a lot of men, and there may be a lot of contact between people. Now, we randomly divided 350 of these hotspots into either an undercover, a uniformed, or a control area, with another 700 hotspots for measuring the spillovers. Just to be clear, the undercover arm is undercover SHE team officers going out and observing for harassment and then catching people in the act. The uniformed arm is still a SHE team officer, but they're in uniform. They are going out and patrolling an area and basically increasing the amount of policing that's happening. Control areas are not areas with no policing. They're simply areas that have the normal levels of policing. So you could think of this as us testing the marginal impact of increasing the amount of policing in an area, as well as testing kind of a novel undercover approach to highlighting or to trying to find these problems. So these are the hotspots in Hyderabad, or at least a sample of them. You can see that a lot of them run across road networks, but they're spread out all over the city. And so it was from these lists that we were able to do our randomization. Our data collection, which is what I really wanted to talk about today, is, I think, quite interesting. We are using an observed harassment in public space as our main outcome. What that is enumerators were trained on how to observe harassment and went to these hotspots to record and observe the harassment that they identified, as well as any harassment they saw when traveling between 2 hotspots. Each enumerator has 6 locations per day, and they spend about 15 to 20 minutes at each location observing. Each location is covered at least once a week, and the route is assigned randomly by enumerator, which means that we have a very large amount of data that likely we're going to be able to at least control for, or completely ignore any kind of enumerator effects that may be coming along with it. So we think we have like a fairly well-powered objective indicator here. We're also going to be measuring a couple of things around officer motivation. And this is going to be a phone survey that we'll be conducting soon. And we were also going to be doing a couple of other in-person data collections, but we will no longer be doing that because of COVID. So here's the results for the study, and unfortunately we find nothing. We find that increasing the undercover or the uniformed arm does not reduce observed street level harassment in any of our treatment areas relative to our control group. And as you can see here, we have a fairly large sample size and are able to control for quite a few fixed effects, but we are not able to find any significant differences due to this policing. Now, what we did find, and here we're showing you the data collection by weeks. So weeks 1 through 6 are basically the baseline, and then 6 through 21 are the intervention. We did find a very passing effect from the uniform arm after a few weeks of operation and data collection, but that disappeared 3 months into the intervention, and we're not really seeing much that's anything different between the uniform and the control. So why do we find these null effects? Well, it's possible that marginally increasing policing really does nothing. Maybe catching people is tough. Maybe people don't update about the police. It's possible also that a hotspot cluster RCT is actually the wrong design for undercover policing. I think it's quite important to note that when you have an undercover policing system, it's changing people's expectations about being caught, but they don't necessarily know where they're going to be caught. That's the whole point of undercover. They don't know where you are. It's possible also the officers are lazy or unmotivated, so that's where I say we have an officer survey that we're going to measure motivation and other things for the SHE team officers to try and figure out, how they respond to working in this type of program. And then finally, I think what's really interesting also is that our enumerators may actually be measuring something different than the officers. Now, we've looked at the results by type of harassment, so really obvious harassments versus a little bit more subtle harassments. We don't find any differences, again, between treatment and control for that. So we don't think that that's necessarily, driven by the type of harassment. But just to double check this, we're going to actually we've created videos that we're going to use and show to enumerators and to officers. And these videos show women being harassed in various different ways, and some videos show women not being harassed. And so we're going to be showing these videos to the enumerators and the officers to see if either group identifies harassment in a systematically different way. And of course, this is basically a validation exercise for our observed harassment. We believe our observed harassment measure is correct as it is measured by the enumerator. It may not be the observed harassment as measured by a police officer or what the police officer is even looking for. Thank you very much for your time.